All right, I'd like to call to order the regular monthly meeting of the Board of Ed. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to get into the habit of reading our mission statement at the start of every meeting. Our mission is to inspire in each student a joy and passion for learning and a commitment to excellence, personal integrity, and social responsibility. I think that's our perfect segue into Avon Achievers. So I would like to call forward Mike Frankwitz from Thompson Brook to present the Avon Achiever Awards to Elizabeth Absher and Laura Ward, and Jason and Domenico will assist.
I'll ask Laura Ward to come up first.
I'll stand next to you?
Yes,
Okay.
and there's a camera over there.
Oh, excellent. I'm usually the one behind the camera, not in front of it.
And then that kind of says why we're honoring you tonight, because you are always behind the scenes for us. For the last several years, you've worked as the Vice President of Marketing for the board, which really means the website and how we sell the programs that the PTO does and the work that they do. It was an established site, you've always said that, but the enhancements that you've made to it and how well you do, the job you do, keeping it up to date for all of us is greatly appreciated. Additionally, your involvement in so many different activities, whether it's the yearbook now that you and Elizabeth have started to have students involved with, but also the plays that you've been involved with in those late hours. They're very much appreciated. So on behalf of the whole staff and students at Thompson Brook School and the PTO, thank you very much for your commitment.
Thank you.
I'll ask Elizabeth to join us. Deb, I did tell her that just because she's president doesn't mean she has to run for a school or a town board.
It seems to be the course of action.
Elizabeth has been a board member of Thompson Brook PTO for quite some time now. She's finishing her second year as the co-president, but she was also involved very early on in terms of bringing the musical to life for us. She decided last spring that she would like to not only be co-president this year, but also be one of the yearbook advisors, and recruited a team of people and had the novel idea of let's include children into creating their yearbook. And so we've had, I think, great success through all of the adults' leadership there in terms of having about 15 students involved with the yearbook. That's the first time, at least in the 5 years that I've been at Thompson Brook, that's happened. Elizabeth has always been there. She served as co-president now 3 years, right? And so while she still has a 6th grader, I'm not making a pitch right now for a 4th term, but there is no term limits to being on the PTO board. But we do greatly appreciate all the work that you've done, fully supporting the staff, especially not only the books, most recently with Jess Buckle, while the Avon Education Foundation gave us a grant. They wouldn't pay for prizes, but the PTO board stepped up, and you're willing to run around town and gather all those for us. And so for that, we appreciate all the work you've done for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And knowing both Elizabeth and Laura personally, I definitely deserving of recognition. So thank you for all the time and effort that you put in for our schools. Our students really benefit from that. I want to allow for you to leave if this is why you came this evening, so you don't have to feel compelled to stay. For the rest, you're welcome to be dismissed at this time. But thank you for bringing your family along to celebrate with you as well.
Thank you very much. I have to run. I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving along, could I have a motion to approve the Board of Education regular monthly meeting minutes from March 20th, 2018?
So moved.
All right, do I have a second?
Second. Oh, Laura, you get it.
Okay, Laura seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so the minutes pass. Now we're at the portion for communications from the public. If anyone would like to come forward to speak to the board. Okay, we're all set. So now I would like to give time to our student representatives, Amir Johnson, Amir Johnson, so you can talk to us about what's been happening in school.
Okay, so today was the SATs. I would like to remind you that the Avon High School production of Crazy For You will be this weekend, April 27th and the 28th, starting at 7:30 p.m. And April 29th, which was a Sunday, at 2 o'clock p.m. That is when those 3 shows will start in the dates. Quarter 3 has ended at Avon High School. That was April 30th, and quarter 4 has begun. On Thursday and Friday, there are parent-teacher conferences at Avon High School, and as well as the SATs happened today, but seniors competed. They completed their capstone today, so this was the end of the capstone presentations.
Thank you, Mayor. So now we'll keep moving forward to the financial report by Heather Machado.
Sorry. So the most notable item you'll note on your summary was the additional $910,000 of encumbrances that occurred between February and the end of March. Again, this is typical of the season, and we'll continue to see those encumbrances grow as the year end comes around and spring purchasing rolls to a close, hopefully. Additionally, I wanted to make note that there's a supplemental appropriation request we'll be talking about later. And at this point in the year, I have a rough estimate of the forecast where we're going to end up. And with that $412,000, we're looking at about $800,000 of year-end unencumbered funds at this point.
Thank you.
Ms. Michaud, do you want to explain any more about the unencumbered funds? I can do it, but you're already doing a great job, so.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we weren't sure who wanted to go there. So Bridget was kind enough to ask me to write up sort of a summary and overview and talk about why Avon Public Schools ends up in this position every year. So I went through the last 3 fiscal years, and I looked at the trend analysis for those unencumbered balances that we see as the norm here at the public school system. So I put together just a little bit of a statement. I'd like to read it into record, if that's okay. This way maybe it would help to bring some understanding and some light to why we are here every year. So Avon Public Schools has averaged during the past 3 fiscal years over $700,000 in unencumbered funds at year-end. This trend relates directly to additional unbudgeted open choice tuition revenue and savings within the salary lines, annually trending between $380,000 and $595,000. Avon Public Schools' participation in the open choice program generates a substantial unbudgeted revenue source yearly, which is mandated by statute to be spent on education. In the past 3 years, we have received approximately $400,000 in additional revenue for the district from the open choice program, thus increasing the year-end unencumbered balance accordingly. Our salary savings are primarily a result of unexpected unpaid staff leave, staff turnover, and unfilled positions year over year. In the current fiscal year, we have had 11 certified leaves of absence, resulting in an average of $25,000 in unpaid salary per individual. Additionally, turnover in personnel has generated approximately $80,000 in savings. Lower needs for substitute custodial staffing, unfulfilled degree changes, and unfilled positions have created an estimated $210,000 in variance. We are proud that we have been able to accomplish so many positive initiatives for our students and school community through fiscal responsibility and continually seeking efficiencies and savings in our budget. I'd like to note some of the more successful uses of the unencumbered balance over the last 3 fiscal years. The annual special education escrow account, funded in full. the telephone system district-wide last year, paid for with the town of Avon. Textbooks over the last several years. Furniture district-wide, directly impacting student classrooms. The activity bus that was desperately needed for our student activities and athletes. Technology, including large sums of Chromebooks and access points all over the district, and professional development. So just some of those items highlight A, where we've been, B, how we get there, and C, what we've been able to do.
Thank you, Heather. That's helpful. Okay, so now moving to our committee and liaison reports, curriculum and professional practices. If Jackie Blea, would you like to update us?
Yeah, my green light's not, oh, I can't see it, but it sounds like it's on.
It does.
We had a great meeting. We talked briefly about retention with Mr. Sturm and Dr. Rusak, and I thought it was a positive discussion. I think they're going to be moving that forward, the changes that are coming. We discussed the homework policy, which Mr. Pelling gave an update on the Homework Advisory Council, and the next step is to take the draft to the policy committee. My understanding is that they're having conversations ongoing currently with staff and administrators, and we discussed the AP ECE curriculum, I think, broadly, and Donna also provided us with a really kind of comprehensive chart of how to understand the things that we have working together and separately, so I thought it was a good meeting.
Any questions for Jackie? Jane? No? I thought you were raising your hand.
No,
I apologize. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jackie. So now moving on to finance with Jay Spivak.
Yes, we just met last Wednesday afternoon. We had a change due to some scheduling, but our next meeting will be Tuesday, May 8th at 6 p.m. We'll be back on our normal schedule. So at our finance committee, we received the letter from the auditors, Bloom Shapiro. It was a clean audit. A couple of issues that they did mention was the fraud risk assessment, which is really in the town's hands to go ahead and have that set up. And also a tip line, which the Board of Ed has already put in place. So we have a tip line with both a phone number and email for tips within the district. The other issues that we discussed were the fees, which we're going to discuss as a board tonight. But we weren't really in a position to change the fees because it's for next year's budget, which is already set. But we were able to review our fees compared to other districts, and that's something we'll now do on an annual basis. We will review what fees we have in place. We did notice our fees for both parking at the high school, our pay to participate, are some of the highest ones around, but that is what we have to keep in place because of our budget for next year. We also discussed the open choice supplemental appropriation, which will come before the board tonight. And one other thing was the update on the cost for maintaining the athletic fields, and we're going to have an outside company review our fields and get back to us with what their assessment is.
Any questions for Jay? All right, thank you. Negotiations, Jason and Domenico.
We unfortunately have not been able to reach an agreement with the security and safety personnel despite great efforts during our meetings. So we will be discussing the particulars a little bit more during executive session, but again, we have not yet reached an agreement.
Thank you, Jason. And we'll leave it at that with the privacy of negotiations. Policy, Laura Ward, Young, sorry.
Okay, so the policy did not meet in the month of April. We will be meeting again in May. One of the things that as chair I've been working on with our new superintendent is to examine how we are reflective and reviewing all of our policies. And we're going to be looking not only through the CABE lens, which is what we've been doing for the past couple of years, but also through the Shipman and Goodwin lens, so to speak, and looking more strategically at what policies seem to be really needing more of our time rather than going through them 0 through 9,000. So we'll be meeting on May 14th on Monday at 7 p.m.
Thank you. Any questions for Laura? All right, moving on to the liaison reports. The CPDC did not meet again. It will not meet until next month in May, correct? So we will go to the next one. The board representative to the Avon Board of Finance, which just met last night, David Kavanaugh, if you'd like to report.
Okay, last night the Board of Finance met, and the most important to us matter on their agenda was the security improvement programs that were based on motions that we had passed previously and presented to the board. Total amount of all the improvements was in the neighborhood of what, about $1 million? And most of those are set to take place over the course of the summer, I believe. So by September, we should be seeing a lot of changes in the schools all related to security.
And to add to that, they did vote on our reallocation of funding from the Avon Middle School Science Lab project to security updates, and they did pass it. So it was a vote of 8 to 1 abstention. Thank you. Now our board rep to the Avon Town Council, which Laura stepped in for Jason this month, if you'd like to report.
So if you don't mind, this might just take a little bit longer because it was a lengthy meeting and much of the discussion was around the turf field project, so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to read from an abbreviated version of my 10 pages of notes. The meeting opened with a continuation of the public hearing on 828 West Avon Road and related lease back of nearby property, and then led into a lengthy discussion regarding synthetic turf field project. And it had been reported that a meeting had taken place at the state capitol where our town manager and the town council chair had met with Secretary of the State of Connecticut Office of Policy Management to discuss the potential for funding for this project. And they were told unequivocally that there would be no state funding forthcoming. There was lengthy discussion as to who would be taking the lead on moving a potential turf project forward. Additionally, questions were raised as to who would be responsible for the cost of maintaining such fields if they were installed. And a town council member had suggested potential sponsorship and or naming rights for private donors. In my prior experience to this with fundraising to rebuild the Avon Middle School tennis courts, it had become aware to me that there are town policies and zoning regulations that restrict that kind of sponsorship or naming. So that was also discussed. Towards the end of the discussion, I was asked by a council member if, as the board representative, I could state whether or not the board will support a synthetic turf project that has been reduced in size and scope, and my response to was to reiterate that this is really a community project with many stakeholders, and that the Board of Education has already voted on and approved it. I also said that while board members may not be aware of recent news regarding the lack of potential state funding, that I was reasonably certain it would still be seen as a worthy project, which would likely be supported as long as the board maintains final approval for the type of system and materials to be installed. It was suggested that the board might be asked by council to vote once again on the synthetic turf project. There was considerable discussion regarding a proposed resolution for approval for language prohibiting waste associated with natural gas and oil extraction. Discussion also centered on whether the matter should be addressed most appropriately at a local or state level. And then there was discussion on changes to the town attorney, an upcoming vacancy in town human resources, the potential risk for computer hacking of public offices, an RFP being sent out for a town of Avon fraud risk assessment, which Jay mentioned, the installation of the Oak Pond fire hydrant, the repurposing of funds for security upgrades requested by the Board of Education, which David mentioned, and also a plan to update the Fisher Meadow lease agreement. There was also a suggestion made to request that Avon police officers complete daily paperwork while parked in front of the schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for taking such copious notes for us. We will be discussing the turf field a little later, but is there anything else within that that anyone had questions on? Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Board rep to the Capital Region Education Council, Jackie Leah.
I did not attend the last meeting, but I think the general feeling and the focus right now is the future funding of magnet schools, and I think that the executive leader there is the executive director is putting together a working group to start discussing the impact that this would have in the coming 2019 and going forward.
Thank you. Any questions for Jackie? Thank you very much. Not having any report to give, I will forego the board chair report and move it to Dr. Carmola to start her superintendent report.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. So, first, what is the hiring report? Placement of certified staff at Seton High School, some non-certified staff, and of note, 2 additional retirements at the high school, Mr. Butler and Ms. Finocchio. We'll be recognizing them in an upcoming dinner sponsored by the Avon Education Association. Sorry to see them go, but happy for them at the same time. Our enrollment report, see next, we are just up 2 students from March, and notably, I think we're up 20 students from April of previous year. So we were at, we're down 80. Looking to the comments, we're down 80 from the previous year, but still continuing to climb in the year that we are in each month. Order. So in regards to school security, I won't reiterate what Mr. Kavanaugh and Ms. Shute already mentioned, but just to say that we did discuss the same security improvements and upgrades with the Board of Finance last evening that were already discussed here by the Board of Education, and that the Avon Police Department and Fire Department work closely with us to collaborate on and prioritize. Some of those projects already have begun. You know, some of the funding is in the budget year we are living in and is already designated for us. The rest is through capital improvement. The rest is coming from a reallocation of the what would have been the middle school science lab project. And as Mr. Kavanaugh said, our hope is to get as much done in the summer as possible. I can't say with certainty that we would have all of the work. It's quite a bit of work.
It is a lot.
That will be done, but we are already looking out with requests for bid proposals from vendors. We're working closely with the town on that, in part utilizing some of the same vendors, for example, in the camera systems, because that will expedite that process, in part because they already have a successful bid with the town, for example. So I'll keep you updated on that schedule of work, but there are a lot of moving parts there, including at times the wiring has to be done and fire alarm systems have to be taken offline and so forth, so we have to ensure the building is empty. So I would say we should expect to see a number of the projects that are complete by the time school opens, but I would make an assumption that it would be very difficult to complete all projects. Particularly when we're talking about the changes to the entrance ways that we already discussed at 4 of the schools.
Yeah.
Likewise, similarly, we've continued going through the plans. We have a meeting scheduled in about 2 weeks where all district level administrators, which is everyone who's here, plus our director of technology, our director of operations, and all of the building principals will get together alongside of the Avon police chief, the Avon fire chief, the Avon fire marshal, town manager Brandon Robertson, and I'm missing someone from that list, our SRO, and anyone else that the chief may bring to me. He may bring our physical assessment team, for example. We are going to go through the district level safety and security plan as an entire team so that everyone is on the same page and understands all the pieces of the plan, because as you know, it's an all hazards safety and security plan. So it ranges from weather issues to active shooters to any possible hazard that could happen. It could be a tornado, it could be a hurricane, it could be a suspicious person on the grounds, it could be we have an issue in town that requires the schools to lock down, for example. So we go through every hazard in the plan and what the plans are for each of those hazards. And that will make it easier, I believe, for us to move forward with any adjustments that might need to be made, but also as all of the town officials, myself included, and the Board of Education have to approve these plans before they're submitted to the state. So bringing all of the administrators and the town officials into a room together to go through them will increase that level of understanding and collaboration from the get-go. I'm thankful for our security director, Jim Connolly, who worked quickly to get something done that I had asked about alongside of the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security in Connecticut. DEMIS is the acronym for short. They provide all hazard safety and security training for not only school officials, school staffs, school faculty, but also local individuals from the fire department, police department, or any other first responders. And they typically offer them a few times a year regionally, and they'll often do them at a firehouse or what have you, and invite school personnel from a region and townspeople from a region. There weren't any left this year, and we had a number of people who had not been through the training. The training was free. So I asked Jim Connolly if he was familiar with it. He was. He reached out to the person that runs it at the State Department. His name is Bill Turley. And he agreed after a lot of coercion, I think, from Mr. Connolly to come and do one here for us in Avon. And it will be opened up to others in the region, but we have the first seats. We are actually going to do it at one of the schools instead of at the fire department because of the parking and so on. So we will send, that will be in June, we will send building principals to that and all central office administrators who have not been trained. I have been, and it was fairly recently, so I won't take up one of our slots. Mr. Connolly has been trained. Our operations director, Mr. Altimus, has also been trained. So the three of us will step aside, and we're sending at least two of our administrative assistants too, who need to understand part of the process, particularly related to communication. So Shirley Moore will go. Dr. Lusek's new administrative assistant, Tony Guerrero, will go. I think that's it from our office. So we'll be a little bit lean for about a day and a half. If you come in and I'm registering students and answering the phones, this might be why. But I'm happy we were able to get that done. We, as you know, have had an ongoing discussion about potential changes to the open campus policy at Avon High School. There was a first in the Avon Police Department's recommendations to the district related to school safety and security. It was recommended that we move toward closure of the campus. And to be clear about what that means, before I move on, currently the practice has been at the high school that if students have what they refer to as an open period, which simply means that they're not scheduled for a class at any of the 4 periods, they can leave campus and return. The problem with this, as we know, is that it makes it incredibly difficult to account for the students when in reality they're in our care because it is the school day. And there's a mass number oftentimes of students and other individuals coming and going from the building, which makes it very difficult for them to maintain with accuracy who's in the building at any given time. Particularly in the case of emergency, is troublesome because we need to be able to account for who's here at all times during the day. That's the sign in and out procedures and so on. So those are just a piece of the impetus behind, first of all, the police department's recommendation and also the conversation that has been happening here at the high school and I believe in community parts at least. So we had that recommendation from the police department. As part of our ongoing school safety and security meetings that are had at all of the schools, in a previous meeting about a month ago, this topic was raised again at the high school's safety and security meeting. All of those committees were required to have them by state law, firstly, and the participation on them, who has to participate is required by state law also. We have to have teachers, nurses, administrators, parents, and basically be a cross-section of the school community. So at that April meeting, maybe the March meeting, correctly, I believe it was actually the March meeting, the discussion was had. There was a lot of discussion about if we close the campus, when would it be? And at the end of that discussion, that committee unanimously, actually, there was a consensus, decided that we should move forward in closing the campus. And I'll explain what I mean by that because it's really, I would call it a modified version of senior privilege. That we work toward doing that at the start of next school year. For several reasons, one of which is we want to be able to effectively communicate it. First of all, with our students, our parents, our faculty here, and obviously the Board of Education being part of the conversation, and with the public. And By the time that this happens, and it's the beginning of April, there's clearly not enough time to be able to do that and to manage that sort of change. So in the interim, what Principal Mr. Pelling and the rest of the team here at the high school has done is to look back at the current procedures, because to be perfectly honest, they weren't necessarily being followed with absolute fidelity. We had students leaving the building often that weren't seniors during these times, and or that maybe didn't have permission to do so. So they, as I often say, pumped the brakes, looked back at what was currently happening, spoke to students about that. Mr. Pelling sent out a notification to parents saying that they need to look back at these procedures and to, at minimum, of course, follow the procedures that are currently in place to ensure the safety of students here on out, which included, as I mentioned, only allowing seniors to leave who are in good standing and qualified for senior privilege, and also have the permission on record of the parents. So that's what's happening now. Moving forward, what we have talked to the students at this point about also is allowing students who have senior privilege, same requirements before being in good standing with grades and so on, attendance, if they have no class scheduled first period, so say they would be in a study hall, then they can arrive to school late, which is current practice, right? If they have parent permission, they have senior privilege, they can come at the end of first period. Likewise, and this is currently the case now, if they have no class scheduled for fourth period, and they're in good standing and have senior privileges, they can leave early and not return. So they can still come late after first period, they can still leave early after fourth period with parent permission on record. That is what we are looking to do next year. So really what we are eliminating is the coming and going in the middle of the day. Obviously what this requires is students to be scheduled in classes or in a study hall, or even as Mr. Pelling and I spoke about earlier today, the cafeteria, for example. So we're still looking for students to be able to have time during the day to get homework done, to go to the library, to get something to eat, to socialize, to do some of the things that high school students do. What we want them to do, however, is remain on campus so that we can account for them and we can maintain the safety of the building in the way that we feel is necessary, and we've been also advised by the police department as. So this has been an ongoing conversation. I'm thankful that Mr. Pelling has had many conversations here in the building already. Class meetings were held to talk to the students about it, to get some feedback, to answer questions. Student government was spoken to here, and I believe obviously these conversations will be ongoing. These are high school students. All conversations are ongoing. Likewise, a discussion was had with the faculty and the staff, and a letter was sent home by Mr. Pelling actually earlier this evening. It was finally ready about Monday this afternoon to tell the parents the same about the plan and the conversations that were had here at the high school with the student. So I'll pause there a minute because I know that's a lot of information. We've had some conversation about it here, but we've had it in bits and pieces since I've been here at least, and this is board meeting 3 for me. So I'll pause and see if there's any comments or questions or something I need to explain in more detail.
Does anyone have a question, Jackie?
I just have a comment. I really appreciate you guys doing this as a parent and as a board member. I think we've had long discussions about it. I thought the letter was really informative. My senior came home after the information session you held with the students, and I've gotten really good feedback about it. I think people want their children to be safe, and I think we all want the buildings to, feel like that we're all kind of doing our part. And I've gotten really good feedback, and I really appreciate the work that you guys have done, as well as the police department. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members? Thank you, Richard, for continuing to take this on from day one. Pretty much this has been a rollout that we will continue to work on, but the amount of integrity that you've given to this, we really appreciate your eyes on this, so thank you.
Thank you. It's been a group effort, and as I said, we wanted to be thoughtful in the implementation, so hopeful this goes with as little kinks as possible. Onto the artificial turf field and the current field update. So luckily, I can say less again. Thank you, Laura, for all that you've shared. So This began with me asking to have it on the agenda and have a conversation about it when I, very early on, spoke to Mr. Robertson about the possibility of the artificial turf field project. So at the time, not having a real sense of what the project was, but I've been here and I've seen the fields and I've spoken to Mr. Filon about it and have a pretty good sense at this point of where we are with playability and our needs moving forward. I took part in a conference call with the architects for the project. Mr. Altimus, Mr. Robertson, and Shaw was on it, so here and there I may defer a little bit because there's, as you know, a lot of history here that I'm still coming to terms with. And from our perspective, first of all, there were changes that they are proposing in the plans, from what I heard as part of that conference call, and Brandon Robertson said the same. So Brandon had sent me a letter, and this is what you're referring to. Brandon had sent me a letter asking if the board wanted to furnish them with a letter that we were interested in the project. And at the March 1st meeting, the council discussed the project's status. So council requested a letter from the Board of Education reaffirming its interest in pursuing the project. I was sent this letter on March 26th, started to gather information about it, then got on this conference call, and then we had a meeting at the town hall. Bruce Williams, the DPW director on their side, Heather, myself, Miles, and Brandon. And I told him, Brandon, that I was putting it on the agenda so we could have a conversation. If the board needed to vote on sending a letter, we would send a letter. But as a result of that conversation, what Brandon and I both agreed was best, and so I bring this to you tonight, was that perhaps we needed another meeting between the town council and the Board of Ed to review the current status of the plans. Because, and I heard this a little bit in the report that you just gave too, I don't think everyone has the same information. And at first I asked for possibly them to come and explain it to the board. That was actually how it started. I asked Brandon if I could bring them here, and since we had it on the agenda, we could have that conversation tonight. And then Brandon said to me, I'm not so sure that everyone that's now on the council has the same understanding either. So I think we should look to schedule a meeting where we bring both boards together, and then Brandon would ask the architect to come and have a conversation about the project moving forward. Because, as I think you know probably better than I, especially if you've been on the board for any amount of time, there are different variations of the project. Is it one field, is it two field? There's no lights, there's wiring, there's parking spaces that have to be changed, there's ADA access that they looked into, retaining walls, the fence being changed, the fence not being changed. There's a laundry list of possibilities to the project. So, as Brandon explained to me, if we have a two-board meeting, have the public there, have the conversation, everyone can ask all their questions, just kind of once and for all, and carve a path forward. Are we taking on the entire project? Are we doing a portion of the project? Are we doing 60% of the project? Based on that dollar amount, will it need to go to referendum, or will it be the capital improvement funds utilized? And until all of those questions are answered and the board and the town makes a decision about the path forward, there's really not a conversation to be had, because a determination has to be made about taking on the whole project and what portion of the project or not the project. So that's really what I offer tonight as the update, because that's where it stands at this time. If the board doesn't agree with the suggestion and we want to just vote and send another letter that says, yes, as you said, we voted on this, we're interested, let's move forward, then that's a possibility. But my understanding is that there have been enough changes to the possibilities for this project. And there are new people on the board, there are new people on the town council, that we may want to revisit the entirety of it again and move it forward. Now, I also asked, what does that mean for timing? Because I know this has already gone on for as long as it's gone on. And Brandon reiterated to me the timeline that it wasn't felt would change no matter what we did here tonight. Send a letter, don't send a letter. The goal was still, remind me, Heather, too, if we move forward with the project, to have it possibly begin next spring. So regardless of what action is taken tonight or none, if we move forward with the project, they're looking at next spring.
Is that spring 20 or spring 19?
Spring 19.
Spring 19, okay.
That said, I also then asked, even on our own side, for an update regarding our fields as they are, because this is what we have right now to plan, and as I understand, there have been issues there. So, and please, again, chime in if you have anything to add. So the field is currently resting, multi-purpose field. Excuse me, field hockey field is right over there. The field hockey field is resting for the spring and the summer, but it will be available for field hockey in the fall. Our plan is to fertilize, grub, pest control, aerate it this spring, and then reseed it again early in the fall. Right. So the rest of the conversation that Heather, Miles, and I had with the town side was that maybe we needed to look a little bit more into piggybacking on some of the processes and the contracts that they have on the town side to maintain the fields, because clearly they maintain more fields than we do. I learned that much of that is done through subcontractors. And so from a manpower perspective, we don't have it on our side to maintain, as Brandon said, the Yankee Stadium, Yankee Field. Red Sox field, it doesn't matter. So that is one of the things that we are now engaged in conversation about. I know this has been a conversation in the past. I feel like we're making some headway in this, though, and maybe even making some changes to use our own people, utilizing some equipment, shared services, contracts, so on. So as part of that, as you mentioned already, I believe Mr. Spivak, we have a company coming to assess all of our fields and to give us recommendations, including keeping us in line with CIAC regulations. And that is scheduled for, is it this coming Friday? Yes, this Friday. And Mr. Altimus will walk the fields. Heather, myself, Bruce from DPW the town has decided to do this with us as part of this collaboration. And we'll get a sense of where we are and what needs to be done to move forward on a proper schedule to maintain the fields too. And if they need upfront services in certain areas and so forth, I think it would be money well spent to have a plan to move forward. Because we're not employing professional field keepers and landscapers. Our folks work really hard at fertilizing and cutting grass and drawing lines and so on, but I think that we're at a point where we need to have a plan, move forward, and moving forward, take proactive measures to take care of these fields.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the information regarding the turf fields or the current field that'd like us to come to some decision about participating in the meeting or sending the letter? Jeff?
I do agree that there needs to be more in-depth conversation, but I think the biggest change to the plan has been what we heard is that there was no state funding. My recollection of the initial plan was there was going to be 3 legs of funding: state funding, town funding, and private fundraising.
Correct.
It sounds like 2 of those legs are non-existent, and it's the real question: do we want the field, or is it that we want the town to pay 100% for the field? Maybe that might be our conversation. I think if that's part of this conversation, Board of Finance needs to be brought in on this as well, because I would hate to be in a situation where, unless I don't understand their role, I would hate to be in a situation where we have this long conversation with just town council, and then we go before the Board of Finance and say, hi, you need to fund 100% of this project and then they turn this down.
Jay?
So I appreciate your comments that anything we do tonight, action or inaction, will not delay anything. I'm extremely disappointed in our town that we're even in this place today. I mean, you look around towns and I feel like I'm on a tour of other districts when my own kids are participating in sports in both the fall and the spring, and I see turf fields in almost every other town. So it's not a luxury anymore, it's the norm in most districts to have turf fields. We voted as a board back on December, well, a letter here dated December 29th, 2016, where the board, which I didn't think needed to take action, but they asked us to write a letter stating that we were supporting the turf field subject to concurrence with the turf fill and presence of a Board of Ed member on the building committee. So I don't think we need to take action, especially since it's not going to delay anything, but I don't know why our town is in a position where we still don't have a turf field today, given what has happened in so many other districts. And it's a disservice to our community, the value of our homes, the ability of our children to participate in sports, and we see that, you know, through our seasons, the challenge. So I would hope that somehow our town finds a way to move this forward a little faster than we have in the past.
Jackie?
Yeah, thank you for all that information. This is a lot, and I'm sure it's a lot for you to try to catch up on because this has been so many years going on now. I guess one of the questions I had was, when you say we are filling, you know, we're doing all that upkeep to the fields, is that the Board of Ed? Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay. I share Jay's concerns. I mean, I remember that vote. I think we all worked really hard to make sure we were passing something forward that we thought was really meaningful and going to move the process along. The other question I have is, did we evacuate this vote? Like procedurally, what happens to the vote we took?
I think, so to go back, because I think Mr. Fleischman's point is a valid one. It's, my understanding is that what is really at issue it's not only do we want to proceed with the turf field and which version of it, it's how will it be funded? Mm-hmm. Because as you took this vote last, as Jeff mentioned, funding was expected from other places besides just town capital improvement funds. And I think at this point, it's, even if it is being funded entirely by the town of Avon with no other support, are we moving this project forward? That, my understanding is that at issue is which version of the project is moving forward, and are we willing to do that and spend the money on the project?
So is your question tonight, I mean, we can't decide that, right? That has to go to referendum. So would we be deciding, what do you need from us tonight to vote to have that meeting?
I really wanted to have, I don't think we have to vote to have the meeting. I really wanted to have the conversation and to say, I guess technically we could respond to the letter or just send another letter that yes, we're interested in the project. But to be honest, I don't think that will really suffice. I don't think that's actually going to cause anything to happen, so to speak. I think that we'd be in a better place if we all got into the same room and had a conversation. Board of Finance gets involved and we make a decision about what the path is forward. Because part of it is that depending on the version of the project that goes forward, it will or will not go to referendum. And so it could possibly be, if it's not the full-scale project, which I know that's you know a controversial piece of it to talk about it too. Which is it? Both fields? Is it one field? Is it which add-ons there are and so on? Depending on the dollar amount, it might be that funds are allocated from capital improvement.
So what's the limit? What's the dollar limit?
I believe it's $2.5 million.
Okay.
And the total project is just shy of $5 million, as it was explained to me on the conference call.
Thank you.
Yes. There is a long list of things that the state has funded for other towns but will not fund for us. And we spoke about some of this just last night regarding some of the security improvements that we're making. I don't know if this is the straw that breaks the camel's back or some other event will be. What I anticipate is if we go back to, if it settles back to the Board of Finance, they're going to discover, if they don't already know, that 2 of the 3 potential sources of funding are gone, and that this is us paying the whole thing ourselves. That may or may not be a problem. The way I see this shaking out is, if we end up going to referendum, that would not be the worst thing in the world. Because if the Board of Finance is going to clamp down on the funding issue, if you go to referendum, if the voters approve it, then we get it. And if we feel as if this is a good use of our money and we want to go forward, whether or not we get any help from the state, if we go to referendum and the voters approve it, then we get it. If they don't, then we don't get it. And I'm okay with that, just because at some point, all of these things that the state won't fund for us have to be addressed. And so either way, I would not be too shy about going to referendum. If it comes down to that, let the people vote.
Thank you. Any other board members? Jason?
I think Houston was
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry, Houston.
I don't see how we can do anything other than hold a conversation, because we can't talk about proposed modifications without knowing what they are. And I wouldn't want to proceed without having a recommendation from administration, who, just reading between the lines, doesn't have a recommendation because they don't know enough about what's going on and what the current state of affairs are. So seems obvious that we say, let's have a 3-party meeting, let's review whatever the experts come back and say, and then we'll decide what we want to do. Some of us are warmer than others. Some of us are warmer than others with conditions. So, there is a significant but vocal minority that's very concerned about what we put in the fill, by example, and that will be a big deal. So that's just, I don't see how we can do anything tonight other than say we'll be happy to schedule a meeting to discuss it with you, because apparently they have something in mind.
Jason, did you have comments?
Yeah, I'm in agreement that I think we need a meeting. The meeting makes sense. And the one thing we haven't brought up tonight that has been brought up in a couple of town council meetings that I was at is not only the cost to put these fields in, but there's a pretty significant maintenance cost that goes along with it. Of like about $100,000 a year is what I've heard at these meetings, which I don't think we should be afraid necessarily of the cost, but we're going to put the fields in. I think we need a clear understanding between the 3 boards how that is going to be taken care of going forward. You don't buy a car without knowing how you're going to be able to change the oil every month. So that has to be part of the conversation. I think we have to make sure there's an understanding on that issue as well. So.
Anyone else? Laura?
So I am hopeful that with Bridget's leadership, it does sound like we're moving forward in the direction of a more collaborative working relationship, because these are really community fields. There are recreational programs that are taking place on those fields over the summers, in which the town is receiving revenue. And by the same token, our students can't play on our own fields and have to play at Fisher Meadows. It's sports that normally they would be able to play here, or they're going to Buckingham because they can't play on our own fields here. And we lose that sense of community when they have to leave the campus to go play somewhere else. So I'm very hopeful that we can create more of a partnership and a working collaborative approach to looking at this. School buildings are town-owned buildings, so any fields here are technically owned by the town, but we're one community. As far as the private fundraising goes, I think there has always been a group of people out there who are willing to contribute in some way, but not a third of a $4.6 million project. So there needs to be also some level of expectation set that if truly there would need to be a partnership with a private sector, what would that expectation be? And why is it that Avon is not being given money? Why is that? It can't just be that that's the way it's been. I'm wondering if we were to be working more closely with our state legislators, maybe we can't get money for a turf project, but maybe to upgrade our science labs. Where's the disconnect there between the town and our state legislators and those that are making the decisions?
Thank you, Boston. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not at this point.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I fully agree with everything that we shared. I think we're being very thoughtful about this project. I agree that it's something that we discussed a couple of years ago, and we were excited to have it move forward. However, if at this time there needs to be another conversation, I think we should participate in that so that we can hear what's being discussed and be a part of that. So I'm comfortable, and it sounds like we're all comfortable with moving forward with the meeting. Do you have any sense of when that might take place, Bridget?
No, soon. I'll have a conversation here tonight and let Brandon know tomorrow that we are interested in setting up that meeting, and we'll move forward.
Excellent. Thank you for looking into the health and well-being of our current fields as well, because that's an important piece. So I appreciate that. So I guess, are we comfortable with moving to the next? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the photography bid update.
This is very brief, just to note, we did not discuss this at the Finance Committee meeting because it was a special meeting. This was not on the agenda. So Mr. Spivak and I agreed to just share the update here because obviously all the the Finance and Policy Committee members are here. At this time, we are not moving forward. We are not moving forward with the bid process for photography for the yearbooks. Our recommendation is that we continue doing the process the way that it happens right now, which is split between K through 6 and 7 through 12 between vendors and processes and PTOs really running that process and utilizing it as a fundraiser to take the students' pictures and create yearbooks and so on. The short of the reason for the recommendation to maintain the status quo, mostly, and I'll explain the one change, is that we wanted to be able to have the time to communicate with our PTOs and families if the process would change, number one, and number two, if the funding structure would change. In other words, the PTOs getting directly the money as a fundraiser from the photography companies. So what we are doing, though, to maintain compliance with the data privacy laws is ensuring that students, parents have signed off on the release of the information to the photography company, and that any vendors that are used at any of the schools sign off on the contract with the district office about how that data privacy needs to be maintained. So we're not controlling the process in its entirety, which in some ways would be ideal in maintaining the data privacy and the flow of money and so on. But we have shored up the process a bit to make sure that we're compliant with state law and what's in the best interest of the schools and our students. So at this time, we notified the PTOs. Ms. Shute and I met with PTO leadership because they had a little talk about this, although I don't think they were fully aware of the plan. And so they know, schedule the appointments for the photographers and so on. We'll continue doing it the way that we're doing it, short of some paperwork.
Thank you for that. I think it's helpful to just have these discussions publicly so everybody knows progress that's being made, and we do have a good relationship with the PTO leadership, so that's good to be a part of. Any questions on that from anyone? Okay, so moving forward with the consent calendar, does any member have a piece that they would like to remove from the consent calendar? Can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
And moved by Houston. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Second from Jason. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Consent calendar is passed. Moving on to new business, the supplemental appropriation. So is this Heather that will share some information, or did you want to speak to that? Okay.
I'll add it if necessary, but I think I was ready to go.
I think most of you are probably familiar with seeing these. I'm sorry I had to come forward this late in the year. Last year, if you recall, the town finance board made a point in saying we can't ask for a supplemental appropriation until the town has actually physically received the funds. Even though the state promised it, I understand why they made that statement, it makes perfect sense. So that being said, the town finally received the funds for the full open choice payment on March 9th, so late this year, but given the fiscal climate, I'm sure you all understand. Anyway, so we're a little bit behind the times, but this is the full amount of supplemental appropriation. The Board of Education is permitted to request per statute to be spent on education. And I would request that a motion be made to push this forward through the other elected boards so that we can get potential passing on the books.
Motion to request a supplemental appropriation from the town of Avon for a total of $412,016 as an additional unbudgeted open choice tuition revenue.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now the 18-19 fee schedule. We wanted to discuss this. Is this again Heather? Okay, Heather.
So I believe Mr. Spivak touched upon this regarding our finance meeting. This is an item that I desired very strongly be brought forward to the board on an annual basis regarding fees, annual fees. Mr. Spivak was correct in that we did collect data from our surrounding area neighbors, which I believe I included in there for your review. At this time, because our budget is set, we really can't adjust any of that schedule right now, but it is something for discussion in the future, certainly. I'm asking that there be a motion by the board to approve the fiscal year 18-19 fee schedule as set forth in the memo.
And so, do you have it to read? Okay, Laura.
And I just want to clarify too that the preschool fees were discussed separately and a letter went out, and they will also be staying the same for the year. Correct. Okay. So, motion to approve fiscal year 2018-2019 fee schedule, including Avon High School parking fees, pay to participate fees, gate fees, and school lunch prices.
Do you
Second.
want to include the tuition in that, or do you think it's...
We did it separately at the previous
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm sorry, did you second that?
I did.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So it
Abstain.
passes. I'm sorry, did somebody abstain?
Abstain.
Oh, okay, so Bogdan abstains. So it passes 801. Now the healthy food certification, I believe Maggie Dreyer is going to join us, am I right? You don't have a mic at your spot. Okay.
This is the annual vote on the healthy food certification on whether we choose to participate. And if we do choose to participate, then there's a second motion, which is exemption. So if we choose to exempt following the regulations for events. So if there were a basketball game or a dance or something like that, we could sell, or a booster club or a club could sell items that wouldn't necessarily have to fit the healthy food certification requirements. So we do this every year. We receive 10 cents per lunch served by complying with these strict nutritional Connecticut standard regulations.
And what's your recommendation this year?
I would recommend that we continue to follow this. There are federal regulations that are slightly less strict than Connecticut's that we would have to follow anyway. So I would recommend following these regulations. We do a really good job in Connecticut doing our best to serve healthy meals to our students. So I would think we should continue to do that.
So moved.
All right, there's two separate motions that I'd like to read into the record, and if anyone else would like to read them other than myself. Okay, the first motion is a healthy food option pursuant to CGS Section 10-215F. The Board of Education certifies that all food items offered for sale to students in the schools under its jurisdiction and not exempted from the Connecticut nutrition standards published by the Connecticut State Department of Education will comply with the Connecticut nutrition standards during the period of July 1st, 2018 through June 30th of 2019. This certification shall include all food offered for sale to students separately from reimbursable meals at all times and from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, and any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or by non-school organizations and groups.
And I would, A, yes, that's what I meant, and B, I also would say that the food director is authorized to execute any necessary documents to transmit the certification to the state of Connecticut.
Okay. Can I have a second on this motion? Okay, Laura? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any in opposition? Okay, I think it passes. I have a second motion to read. Exemption for food items. The Board of Education will allow the sale to students of food items that do not meet the Connecticut nutrition standards, provided that the following conditions are met. 1, the sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. 2, the sale is at the location of the event. And 3, the food items are not sold from a vending machine or school store. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice, meeting, or extracurricular activity. For example, soccer games, school plays, and interscholastic debates are events, but soccer parties, practices, play rehearsals, and debate team meetings are not. The regular school day is the period from midnight before to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held. Can I have a second?
I have a question about that.
Can I have a second first?
Second.
Okay, Jason, discussion?
Where's the bake sale, what mandates, what controls bake sales in this language?
The fundraising piece of it. So,
So you can't do it before school, you can't do it during lunch, you can only do it after school.
if it meets the 3 exemptions. It gets a little more complicated with the bake sales because it also then affects the wellness policy, which the wellness policy says the foods that are served and sold to students will follow Connecticut nutritional standards. So it's a little more complicated than just saying, when can I have a bake sale? So really, bake sales, selling candy, all this really came into place back in the days when kids would walk around with boxes of candy bars during the day. So they wanted to get away from all of that. So bake sales during a school day is never going to be allowed.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So it passes unanimously. Okay, thank you, Matthew.
See, the new business, the high school graduation day.
Yes.
You want me to do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Recommending to the Board of Education tonight that we approve the Avon High School graduation date of June 19th.
Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Jackie, second?
Yes.
Second.
Jay? All in favor of having the graduation?
Question.
date be June- Okay.
Right.
Isn't June 19 a regularly scheduled Board of Ed meeting? Are we moving it or are we holding it the same date?
My suggestion would be that we move it only to give it its due. Do you
I would
agree
think
with
that would be reasonable.
Okay.
I figured I should at least point out that
Yes.
we're scheduling ourselves to be in 2 places at once, which is
Correct.
normally not recommended.
I agree. The graduation would be ahead of time, and I certainly want to give Bridget her time to enjoy the celebration as well, and we participate, so yes. So we'll have to discuss moving that date, hopefully sometime close to that, because it is the last one of the school year.
I would love it right the week before, not the week after, because I feel like everybody's going to be.
I will, if you like, I'll have Shirley send out the possibilities and we can respond that way. I wouldn't assume everyone was ready to decide tonight, but
Or even the
I
week
can't.
of, the week of.
Yeah, how about Wednesday night? How about the next night?
So could we have that be a possibility then, Bridget?
the night after
Yes.
or the previous week.
What if people have graduation parties to attend that week?
Like, that's where we would gauge if we don't have enough people to make it, and then we can adjust from there.
I'll have Shirley send it out. We knew this obviously was going to happen. If we carried this out tonight, we expected that would happen. We're just doing it in that order. So
What time is graduation expected to be?
6 o'clock.
6 p.m.?
All in in favor of the graduation date being June 19th?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. And now we move to communications from Avon Board of Education members. Does anyone have something they'd like to share?
I'll share one item. In honor of Jean Ann Pattyfoot's service, immediately after her departure, I made a contribution in her name to the Avon Dollars for Scholars. If anyone is interested in adding to that contribution, I would certainly welcome it, and I'm sure she would welcome it, so you don't have to meet the threshold to hit a name. You just add it to mine. So figured I'd let everybody know.
Thank you, Houston. That's very considerate. Does anyone else have any comments? Laura?
Not to reiterate or move more on the turf issue, but two things. One, that project could be done in phases. It doesn't all have to be done at once. That's another possibility. And two, we are so weather dependent that no matter how much grub control, fertilizer, aeration, new soil, or mowing we do to any of these fields, we are so weather dependent. And I think that needs to be part of this equation on how we are able to access our fields compared to other towns.
Very true. Any other comments? Okay, now we move to our second opportunity for communications from the public. If anyone who has stayed here with us would like to add. What's up? Or, okay, please come forward and just tell us your name. And I apologize that you don't have a microphone, so if you could just speak loudly enough so that hopefully the camera can pick up on it as well.
That's okay. Hi, I'm Mary Deppie, and I wasn't planning on talking, so I might just wing it. But I guess I'm here because I wanted to hear what was going to be said about the turf field. And I just wanted to say that to what Jay said, that on December 29th, it was approved with the Board of Ed and the Town Council. And then what happened is the Town Council sent a letter after that meeting on January 18th. It was from Brandon, and he sent it to the 3 state reps requesting, state funding assistance and how can you help us. The state reps then sent a letter on January 25th, this is in 2017, to the Office of Policy and Management. There was no reply of any kind from what is on record and what the Town Council has said. So on May 15th, 2017, Brandon wrote another letter, this time to the Office of Policy and Management, following up on the letter that the 3 state reps wrote. And then it just kind of went by the wayside. So there's a lot of people in the community that have seen their children play on the fields and not be able to play because of the conditions of the fields with our wet springs and our rainy falls. And so people have brought it back to the attention of the Town Council to kind of find out where this is going. And the people were asked the Town Council in January to revive this project again, kind of like where to go. There was a big committee that put this whole project together, so many people that volunteered their time, spent so many hours on and have this project done. And from what we have been told, it's shovel ready, but then it just kind of got filed away. So now, since January, every month at the Town Council meeting, it's been on the agenda, but it's not really moving forward that much, because every time they were trying to say, well, there's changes, we have new members on the Board of Ed, there's more new members on the Town Council, we need to talk about this again. But the truth of the matter is this has been talked about for the last 10 years, as long as I've been a resident here and have been going to meetings. And it finally got to the point where it was ready to have something done. And now we're still in limbo. And I mean, what's happening now, as Jay said, we are one of the very few schools in our conferences and in the whole CIAC that do not have a turf field. And it's really impacting not only the infrastructure of our town, the property values, but our youth leagues all the way up to our varsity teams that they can't practice competitively to compete. And it's really a shame because Avon High School is a strong academic school, but it's also known it does have a strong athletic program, and it's failing. And there are students that are leaving to go to private schools for not necessarily, you don't leave Avon because of the academics, you're leaving it for other reasons. And I think, I don't know what we can do to get it faster, but I think if it can't get done for the fall of 2018, then I think that we need to really think about what we can do for the teams that need turf. Like, for example, in the fall, field hockey, there's 10 teams in their conference that all have turf. And the only teams that don't have turf are Northwest Catholic and East Catholic. You can't really count them the same. And so for them to be practicing on grass and then going to play on turf field at Glastonbury or in Simsbury, it's just a total disadvantage. So then I don't know where the funding would come for or how it would be done, but if we can't have turf, then maybe the field hockey field has funds somehow from a combination, I don't know how it would come from, but from the Board of Ed or from maybe when Tim Filon does his budget for athletics, maybe he budgets in some kind of transportation to rent turf at Ethel Walker so that they can start their preseason right off the bat. Because honestly, if they work on that field, right, I mean, already we're into spring. And I'm sure many of you have your own lawns, and when you go through this whole process, it takes longer than 4 months for roots to really mature into the ground and for the grass to grow. And it might look good in the middle of August, but you come 3 weeks into that field hockey season and you look where they do their corners or where they're by the goals, and it will be all worn out again. And there'll be bare spots. And it's really dangerous. It's not, the sport is not to be played like that. I mean, if you have a really trimmed grass and it's all 1.5 inches or lower, then it can be played on it. But that field's never been like that. And it was a problem 10 years ago, but there were maybe only 5 teams that had turf. You know, now there's twice as many teams. And then the same goes for the spring sports too. I mean, lacrosse has just had such a rough start. And, you know, where they've had to start their season indoors, whether they're, I mean, imagine high school varsity players practicing in the gym. I mean, it's just, you can't, I mean, they can't do their maximum shooting power strength. They can't practice to their potential. I mean, it's like, just, it's limiting the kids and what they can do. And, you know, and they have to bus all the way to Windsor to get indoor space. And I mean, a lot of these kids, that's the thing, a lot of these kids are really good student athletes. They're like the top 10 or 5% of your graduating class as far as in academics. And they're trying to juggle getting home at 7, 8 o'clock at night and trying to do their homework and everything. So I don't know, I just with that, I didn't go on too much, but I just kind of wanted to say that I think that you guys have been supportive of it, and it's really disheartening what the town council has been doing, and it seems like it's been pushing it back on the board when it's been agreed upon. And I don't know how many times the same conversation can be done over and over and over again. there's really not that many changes. I've read through the stuff, I've been to so many meetings, there's not a lot of changes in it. Yeah, they want to dissect it a little bit and take that 5 million and see maybe if they could do something, maybe they, but, I mean, it's like, just get started. It's like you're going to do a renovation, you have a plan, you get started, and you have to tweak things along the way, but that's part of it. But you got to start sometime. It's like, what? We're just wasting time, and it's a disservice to our students and our whole community. It's not just the student athletes. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else? Amir?
Okay, so I just had a question about like a bake sale, like what she was talking about. So kind of what is classified as a bake sale? Like if I have goods but I don't sell them, I request a donation and I'm actually not selling them, is that still classified as a
Yes, it is. Believe me, when these came into play, we came up with all kinds of scenarios, and bottom line, if somebody puts money and you give them a product, you sell them a product.
It's a good idea, though.
Yes.
Very clever.
Just leave the money here. You may find a cookie over here.
You could think about selling products that fit the regulations. So that's something I would certainly be happy to work with you on. It's just, it has to do with the nutritional regulations, things that you see someone in.
no.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, so prior to us moving into executive session, let's take a recess so that people are allowed to exit, and Eric can turn off the cameras. Is there anything else? Okay, so move to recess, and all in favor?
Why don't we just move to go to an executive session, because otherwise it's not on the record. So I'll move to go into executive session at 8:24.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Can we take a 5-minute recess then?
Yes.
Thank you.
For your recess report.